Have you ever walked into one of those high-end home decor stores and seen something that you've absolutely fallen in love with, but the price is just not quite worth the spend? Well, this happened to me the other day, and then one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I decided to make 5 different high-end dupes, all using one package of air dry clay. I've never tried something like this before. I've done my share of air dry clay projects, but this is an extra challenge, and I honestly don't know if I'm gonna nail it or fail it. I'll let you be the judge, just please be kind. So we're gonna have some fun. I don't quite know how these are gonna turn out, but I'm gonna tell you which ones I would make again and which ones maybe not. For the first project, I'll be making a wood bead garland. I saw this beautiful garland in a little home decor boutique near my home, but the price, $120, was a little more than I wanted to spend. So I took another good look at it and went home and opened up my air dry clay. I've seen these made with either a cross or a heart. I decided to go with the cross, and I wanted to begin by creating kind of a form that I could use to wrap my clay around. Here I'm just using regular household foil and putting it in a cross shape, just smushing the pieces together and kind of pressing them so that it would stay nice and firm for me. Once I had my shape, I just punched a hole in the top with some of my tools, and this is going to allow me to thread all of the beads and attach it to the cross. I'd say I used about 1/8 of this block of air dry clay. Then I rolled it out, adding some moisture as needed, and got it into a nice thin layer. Then I was able to apply this directly onto the foil to start molding my cross shape. Once I had the clay in a good spot, I poked a hole to match the foil underneath, and then left this to dry for at least 24 hours to about 2 days. While the clay was drying, I turned to painting the wooden beads. I found these beads online, and I'll link to them below. They're just wonderful for crafting, and I had this gold paint and white chalk paint already on hand. So I painted about half the beads in gold, half in white. Then I went through and dry brushed with the opposite color using a sponge. This gave it a really nice chalky effect that I think looked a lot like the one I saw in the store. I have a confession to make. I made a new cross because I didn't like the first one very much. When I looked back at the picture of the one in the store, it was a little bit slender and long and flat, and mine was actually kind of chunky. So I redid the cross, waited for it to dry, and then I covered it with this beautiful gold paint, the same that I used for the wooden beads. And I actually looked at a lot of different gold paints before I decided that this was the one that matched the one in the store the best. I decided to use a regular jute twine to string everything together because the garland in the store had kind of a rustic look. So I'm taking my twine and stringing all of these wooden beads, and then I'm going to place both ends of the string through one gold bead because that's how the one was in the store, and I'm trying to make it look just like the one in the store. And then I attached my cross and put it all together. This is such a fun DIY, and wood bead garlands are so trendy right now, especially on a coffee table. So I just decided to put mine on some nice coffee table books, and I'm loving the way this turned out. Here's our price comparison. The one in the store was $120. Mine turned out to be $11. For the next DIY, I decided to make a trinket tray. I had seen these beautiful trinket trays on Pottery Barn, and I decided, I bet I could make that. So I got out my air dry clay and started on project number 2. Just to make sure that the clay would be nice and even in terms of the thickness, I also used these little scraps of wood on either side. That way when I rolled it out, I didn't have any wonky areas that were too thick or too thin. I really wanted the trinket tray to be nice and smooth. I'm also using water here and there just to smooth out the clay if it starts to dry out. I don't know about you all, but I always find the most random things to use as tools. This is actually the lid of a to-go container, and it just happened to be the perfect size and shape for this little trinket tray, so I just went with it. Now I just had to smooth out the edges. And speaking of random tools and dishes, I borrowed this little Dr. Seuss bowl from my sweet boys. They won't miss it for a couple of days, and it was just the perfect shape and curvature for this little jewelry dish. I just put a piece of plastic in between so that I could make sure it would be easy to remove later on, and then I just gently pressed the clay into the bowl. After about a day of drying, I then flipped over the bowl because the inside was dry, but the outside was still a little bit wet. So I let that dry another day or so, and then I was ready to begin decorating it. I really wanted a nice and smooth surface on the inside, so I used 100 grit sandpaper to smooth out all of the edges. Then I took some chalk paint and decided to apply a base coat on the inside before starting with the decoupage. I love these chinoiserie napkins that were a gift from a friend, so I started by separating all of the 3 plies of the napkin to just use the pattern layer. Once I decided which one of these beautiful segments I wanted to use on my trinket tray, I traced a circle just a little bit larger than the dish. It can be a little tricky doing decoupage on a curved surface. I started by applying Mod Podge to only half of the trinket tray. Then I used my fingertips to gently press the napkin into the tray. It can start to buckle in some places, and if it does that, I found that making a few little cuts kind of diagonally will help it to lie flat. I also like to use plastic wrap anytime I do a decoupage project because it prevents your fingertips from getting all sticky. And trust me, you don't want to risk ripping your napkin when you've come so far already. I then applied more Mod Podge around the entire edge of the trinket tray so that napkin would really be sealed down. Here's a look at what it looked like after this first step. Once it had dried about 2 hours, I went ahead and put a top coat of Mod Podge gloss formula. I thought this would kind of give more of a shiny porcelain effect. Just to give a little extra bling factor, I added a pretty gold trim around the edge using the same paint from the first project. This jewelry dish was actually fairly easy to make. It's definitely a project I would try again. The Pottery Barn trinket dishes are about $15 each, and we made this for $2. We're gonna take things up a notch with this DIY candle holder. I had seen these candle holders at Anthropologie, and I thought, let's try to make that. So I had these little champagne plastic cups, and I thought the base would be perfect for the bottom of a candle holder. So I rolled out some clay and then just placed it on top of this plastic base and sort of shaped it around. This was a little trickier than I expected because the clay just doesn't stick to the plastic. It slips around. I had to use plenty of water and smooth it out. So this was definitely harder than I expected. To make the stem of the candle holder, I rolled some clay out and wrapped it around this wooden skewer that we just happen to have in our kitchen, and it worked. So I went with that and just smoothed some clay around to attach it to the base. By some miracle, after about a day, it was sticking together and holding up pretty well. So I let it finish drying by turning it over inside my glass jar. Then I turned to making the leaves. Now this was way harder than I expected. So I went back and looked again at the picture of what it was that I was trying to make. So I decided to use the left candle holder as kind of my guide, but you can see it took a few attempts to get this clay to stick to the candle holder. Part of the reason is that the stem was already dry, so I had to really smush on more clay and wet it as I went along to get these leaves to stay. So I definitely used all of my tools for this one and took my time starting at the base and just working my way up. I let all of that dry for about a day, then I worked on creating the top of the candle holder. I had tried this once before, but I realized I needed the clay to be wet to make it attached to the base of the candle holder. So I went ahead and reshaped it and then made a hole so that I can put it on top and attach it to the base. I had to use all of my tools to get the top of the candle holder attached, but since the leaves were already dry, I wasn't too worried about messing up the rest of the structure. By the time I got done, I was pretty proud of my little candle holder. As a finishing touch, I again took some sandpaper to really smooth out some of those bumpy edges around the base. Then I gave it another coat of white chalk paint, just like I used in the last DIY. I'm always excited when something I made actually works, and this candle holder seems to be holding up pretty well. I don't know that I'd make this again because it was more work than I expected. The Anthropologie candle holder would have cost $38. We made ours for $3. This bird statue project was one of my favorites. I had seen these little birds at Pottery Barn, and I thought this little cutie was one we could try to make. So again, I'm starting with foil to make a shape of a bird that I can then wrap the clay around. To give the form a little more structure, I took some wire and then tried to make the shape of the tail looking back at the image because I knew that it was going to be hard to get the same effect with foil alone. So I very carefully shaped a tail into something that I thought looked like the picture. Then I attached it to the rest of the form using more foil. Rather than create a whole sheet of clay, I just attached different pieces of clay to the foil and then smoothed it out afterwards. Once I had the basic shape of the bird, I went ahead and added a beak while the clay was still wet. The final step was adding eyes on either side. This was a little more challenging than I thought because it's hard to make sure that it's in the same place on both sides. I was actually pleasantly surprised with how this turned out after waiting for the clay to dry. The next step would just be creating the wooden base and then painting the bird. To attach the bird to the base, I used a wooden dowel and then made a hole in the bird and another hole in a scrap piece of wood. I'm using a scrap piece of poplar here, so I used a pre-stain wood conditioner and then stained it with a color that I thought would look somewhat similar to the Pottery Barn bird. While the wood was drying, I turned to painting the bird. I really struggled with this decision because I thought the white looked so pretty, but I was committed to making this look just like the Pottery Barn bird. So I mixed some metallic silver with black and then painted on a coat, let it dry. Then I came back with the gold paint that we used earlier and just dabbed it on very lightly using a sponge. This gave the bird more dimension, and to me it made it look a lot more like actual metal. While I don't think this looks exactly like the Pottery Barn bird, I do think it's pretty sweet, and it was really fun to try to make an animal shape with air dry clay. The Pottery Barn birds run between $20 and $30, and we made ours for about $6. Now it's time for the ultimate challenge, a DIY clock. When I saw this clock at Anthropologie, I thought, it kind of looks like clay, but I have never made a clock before, so I think this is going to be extra challenging. I knew I needed a good solid base to put the air dry clay on. Using a salad plate, I just traced some half circles onto cardboard. Then I found this DIY clock kit that actually came with 2 clock mechanisms, so there might be another DIY clock in my future. I cut a strip of cardboard to place in between my 2 semicircles, and then I made notches with an X-Acto knife so that I could curve it around the half circles. On one of the cardboard pieces, I also cut out a square shape so that I could put my clock inside. On the other piece of cardboard, I had to make a hole so that I'd be able to put the clock face on. One challenge I faced is my clock hands were a little too long, so I did have to trim them down. I wasn't sure if the air dry clay would stick to the cardboard, so I went ahead and wrapped the cardboard pieces in foil before applying my clay. Once I had my clay pieces all smoothed out, I just let them dry right on the foil and gave it about 2 days. Once they were done drying, I removed the foil pieces so that I could start attaching the cardboard form. I cut extra pieces of cardboard and used them as tabs to tape down the cardboard pieces together. I also realized that it would be easier to put it together if I removed all of the foil from the front and back of the clock face, so I went ahead and did that. Taping all of the cardboard pieces really helped to keep the structure together. Then it was just a matter of creating a bridge to connect the front and back of the clock. I had to be really careful with this step because it's not easy to connect dry clay with wet clay, and I didn't want to risk cracking the front and back of the clock as I did this, so I just took my time with it. After about a day to a day and a half, it was all seamlessly put together, so then I just wanted to add a bottom, and I went through the same step to cut a strip of clay and just use my tools to attach it to the dry clay. Once the clay was dry and I sanded it down, it was time to apply some gold leaf. I'm using gold leaf adhesive, and then my husband gave me these gold leaf sheets that come in gold, silver, and rose gold, so I'm excited to finally put it to good use. I applied these all over the clock, looking at the picture as a guide, and then I just brushed away the excess pieces. I'm really thrilled about how this turned out. I think it looks actually pretty similar to the Anthropologie clock. And the most amazing thing? The clock actually works. It now sits in my craft room, and I'm really enjoying looking at it. The Anthropologie clock would have put us out $158. We made this clock for $12. If you'd like to explore some other air dry clay projects, I'm going to leave some videos for you here. Be sure to let me know which of these was your favorite, and go out and make something beautiful.